Lord, the light of your love is shining in the midst of the darkness shining. Jesus, light of the world, shine upon us. Set us free by the truth you now bring us. Shine on me. Shine on me. Shine, Jesus, shine. Fill this land with the Father's glory. Blaze, Spirit, blaze. Set our hearts on fire. Flow, river, flow. Flood the nations with grace and mercy. Send forth your word, Lord, and let there be light.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us. I'm Dave Grant.
I'm Jim Larson. Welcome to Let the Bible Speak. We've been going for the last couple of weeks and talking about the names of God. Dave, take it away.
Descriptive names.
Descriptive names.
Get your Bible out, because you're actually going to be able to read along with us and understand what these names and what they look like in English. But the descriptive name actually has meaning. Yes. And so what we're doing is we're trying, as more than ever before, trying to learn how to trust God. Because in our modern world, it may seem like he's not paying attention. And when something bad happens, all the more reason we sometimes think, well, where's God? I can think back to many years ago, a young mother had twins. And within 2 months, both had died. And we held that memorial service, but the mom had a real hard time with it. Was God on vacation? Why wasn't he listening to my prayers? And so these descriptive names of God will help us understand that in these low times in our lives, he is still ever present with us. And so we're going to try to develop this lesson so that you can trust God as well. So as we begin our discussion of today's name, we're going to look at Jehovah, Yahweh. Now I give both names because for a long time, Jehovah was the name that many people relied upon, but the scholars have continued to work over the years, and going with Hebrew scholars might be the best way since it is a Hebrew word. It's called the Tetragrammaton.
That's a big word.
You don't have to remember that one, but tetra means four. And so Tetragrammaton is a four-letter word without any vowels in it. How do you pronounce that?
Yahweh.
Well, for a while they put vowels in it, and they said Jehovah. So it was a transliteration into English. Jehovah became the English word. But most recently, within the last 100 years, the scholars have developed a pattern of following Hebrew protocol. Mm-hmm. And they've come up with a better way of adding those vowels, and it's Yahweh. Like Jesus is probably Jesus, not Jesus. But in the Greek and the English and the Hebrew, we've got to best understand how to use these words. So sometimes I might slip and say Jehovah, because we sing about it at church. Let the praises give Jehovah, because it's an old hymn and it uses the old use of the word. Yahweh is probably the one I'll use most of the time, and that means I am who I am. And if I could say one thing, it's probably more that God is ever present. He's present in every situation.
Past, present, future.
Yep. Jesus used that terminology in the book of Revelation. The one who was, who is, and who is to come. In other words, eternal. It means eternal. And that's what the name of God is. Yahweh. YHWH. The earliest and most common pronunciation, of course, is Jehovah. Mm-hmm. Since it's a transliteration with arbitrary vowels from the word Adonai, which is it's a Greek word meaning Lord, we now see that a lot of deity in the Middle East, in that whole area, uses part of that name, Adonai, in their name for their God. El is the name of God, supreme being. And they use Adonai a lot with that. And so it's probably better to stick with just the Hebrew on this one, because our God is eternal. He's ever present. And we're going to look at how this name was revealed to us in the Bible. The first time it shows up is in Exodus. And we're going to look at Exodus 1, 2, and 3. In fact, do you recall a burning bush in the Bible? You know, I watch Jeopardy, and whenever they have the Bible category, it seems to be the least known category. Doesn't matter who the scholar is on that Jeopardy program. When they do Bible, I know the categories, and most of the people don't know their Bibles. It's interesting that that's the way it is.
They know everything else under the sun.
Now, they might understand the burning bush, because that's one of the most popular stories in the Bible.
Right.
A bush that's on fire that never goes out.
And talks to Moses.
The talking burning bush. Well, that's the story we're going to look at, because that's where God chooses to reveal his name, the eternal God. So let's go to this part of our story in Exodus 1 is Israel is in misery.
Yeah.
Times
are tough.
They've been enslaved.
Yeah.
Now, when Joseph brought Israel, his family, to Egypt, they settled in the land of Goshen. But over the many years, the king forgot who they were, or didn't want to know who they were, and they enslaved them. And so they were just their workers, and they beat them, and they treated them badly.
And we're talking hundreds of years of time.
Yep.
And so sometimes we got to remember that, because we go, well, how did it go from this to that? Well, it didn't happen overnight.
Generation after generation.
And just how things change in our world today. You just go back, start going back in time, and we have a pretty small picture generally in our history. But if we keep going back, we can see how things happen.
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, this is the way it turned out for them, and they were in sorry shape.
Oh.
And they were probably wondering, where's God?
Well, and they cried out to him.
Yeah.
Because they needed relief.
Are we ready for the text?
Yeah, let's read Exodus 1.
Exodus chapter 1, verses 8 through 14, I'll be sharing with us. Exodus chapter 1, verses 8 through 14. Now there arose a new king over Egypt, who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, Behold, the people of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. Oh, they were getting scared of them. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply. And if war breaks out, they join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land. So he's somewhat logical in his thinking, maybe. Therefore, they set taskmasters over them to afflict them with heavy burdens. They built for Pharaoh store cities, Pithom and Ramesses. But the more they were oppressed, and the more they multiplied, and the more they spread abroad. The plan wasn't working. And the Egyptians were in dread of the people of Israel. So they ruthlessly made the people of Israel work as slaves, and made their lives bitter with hard service in mortar and brick, and in all kinds of work in the field. In all their work, they were ruthlessly made them working as slaves. They went from people with freedom to slaves, and a burden of a heavy work all the time.
They were honored guests in the land of Goshen under Egypt's protection for many years. Mm-hmm. Honored guests because of Joseph, who was second in command, second only to Pharaoh.
And made Egypt very rich with his wisdom.
And so it's interesting to go from honored guest to slaves. But that's over a period of 400 years. And God prophesied in advance that this would happen. Mm-hmm. Because he wanted to deal and teach the people to rely on him, to trust him. Because the only hope is to be one with the Creator. And so archaeology's given us some evidence as to these ancient cities that are in here. So many times archaeology will actually say, yeah, what the Bible said was true, and that was written how many hundreds of thousands of years ago? Hundreds to thousands of years ago. So when you think about that, we have evidence that these cities existed. Mm-hmm. Joseph was brought to prominence in Egypt, even though he came in as a slave. Isn't that just a backward story? He came in, sold into slavery, and he became the second in command of Egypt. God was with him, and he trusted God. And it was the strength and power of Elohim, strong, faithful creator. It was his power that made Joseph second in command, so that he could bring his people to Egypt and be saved. And he built these cities as storehouses, and they were rebuilt, and more cities were. Egypt was a world power.
For sure.
And they ruled the world. And so Israel had not much choice. They ended up becoming slaves. Well, as you can see at the very end, and this was one of my dad's favorite words in the Bible, ruthlessly. And I questioned him often. I said, well, what's so special about that word? Well, he says, your mother's name is Ruth. And so it always reminds me that she is so precious, and so was Israel at one time when they came to Goshen. But now they're being treated without any grace, without any love, so they're ruthless. And so Israel was treated ruthlessly. And that's where we end that part of the story, and yet they cried out to Elohim. That was the God they knew, the strong and faithful creator. If he's so strong, why is he letting us remain as slaves? And so they cried out to him, and he hears their cry. He remembers his covenant to them. And now we're in Exodus chapter 2 in the story.
So ruthlessly was less Ruth.
Yeah, well, yeah, that too.
Yeah, so, and then your dad's name was Les. So here we're talking about names and meaning, and he's saying pull Ruth out of there, and it's not a very good situation, right?
That's true.
And then less Ruth, there we go.
Excellent, Jim. That's a good point.
Okay, here we go back to Exodus chapter 2, verses 23 to 25. During those many days, the king of Egypt died, and the people of Israel groaned because of their slavery and cried out for help. Their cry for rescue from slavery came up to God, and God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. God saw the people of Israel, and God knew. We're going to talk a little bit more about this remembering aspect of God, and different from the way we talk about remembering. We did a little bit on that last week, but I'm going to touch on it again today a little bit.
Think about it. All of it is just memory for us.
Right.
Remember to do this. You used an example in your preparation.
Yeah, it's not like a man who forgets things, and you probably saw the show around Christmas time. You know, remember in A Wonderful Life, Uncle Billy, he had the strings tied around his finger because he kept forgetting things, so he needed help to remembering them. Or, you know, we walk downstairs to get something out of the pantry, and then we start looking around in a circle going, what am I doing down here? We're not talking about that kind of remembering. It's different with God. It's not that he ever forgot or he doesn't know. It says just being brought back forth, so to speak.
Yeah. Brought to
forefront?
The forefront so that he can deal with it. Because he said, well, I've made this promise and it's time to fulfill it. That's where he brought up, when you in your reading, Isaac, Abraham, Jacob. That promise to Abraham that all nations would be blessed through his seed was also restated to Isaac and restated to Jacob. So that promise, if he is really Elohim, then he's going to be faithful to that promise. So when he heard their cry, their prayers to Elohim, faithful creator, he actually brought it to the forefront, said, I'm going to deal with it. And it was the time that he had prophesied, 400 years. So when we look at 400 years, a lot can happen in 400 years.
Yes.
In our modern society, we're not even 400 years old in the United States of America.
Not even close.
And yet, have you seen generations change? They even name the generations now.
Yes.
We've got the greatest generation. We've got I'm just on the tail end of the
baby boomers.
Baby boomers.
Yeah.
And then
millennials.
Millennials. Then there's a Y now.
Yeah.
A Y generation.
I can't keep up with it all.
No, there's too many labels. But it shows you that each generation wants their own identity. And they develop an identity. And how much has it changed from, and you got to be older like me to realize this, but the greatest generation, these guys, they gave us our freedom. And now, how many of the newer generation really care about that freedom? They're trying to give it away in some cases. So how much has changed in just 200 years?
Yeah.
Well, that's what happened in Israel. Their whole identity was changed. They became slaves. To best understand the word in covenant language, the word Yahweh, is God keeps a record of things. And you might say, well, no, he doesn't keep a record of my sins. Well, if you are a Christian, he will wipe the record clean. That's what the blood of Jesus, that's powerful, that's strong.
Mm-hmm.
And in Jeremiah 31, he makes a prophecy that in the coming days, which would be the Christian age, I will blot their sins out and remember them no more. Okay, now that word remember means I'm no longer going to bring it up and say, hey, what, when I was growing up with my family, we always seemed to remember the bad things someone else did in the family. Well,
Bring them
she
back
did
up
this.
again.
She did this. She did this. Well, I said, did you forgive her? Yeah. Well, why are you bringing it up then? That should have been wiped out, like God forgives.
That's biblical.
And so we grew up with that idea, bringing up the past. You're bringing up the past. It's been forgiven. It needs to be forgotten. No longer bring it up. It won't be, it's still in that brain of yours. But you just don't bring it up and hold it against anyone.
Are we ready for Exodus 3?
Well, this is where we're actually going to see the deliverance initiated. God says, I'm stepping in and I'm going to make this happen. And Moses was the one he
And I'm
called to
going to use
deliver
you,
them.
Moses. Chapter 3, verses 1 through 15. Now Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, and he led his flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Oreb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire. And out of the midst of a bush he looked, and behold, the bush was burning, yet it was not consumed. And Moses said, I will turn aside to see this great sight, why the bush is not burned. When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. Then he said, Do not come near. Take your sandals off of your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. And he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Here we go again. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and I have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hands of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of the land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And now behold, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me, and I have seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppressed them. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, Who am I, that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out to Egypt? How many times have we ever said that, eh? He said, But I will be with you, and this shall be the sign for you that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. And then Moses said to God, If I come to the people of Israel and say to them, The God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, What is his name? What shall I say to them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, Say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, Say this to the people of Israel, The Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent you. This is my name forever, and thus I am to be remembered throughout all generations. The name I am, Dave.
Oh, it's powerful.
It is.
I get chicken skin just reading through that, to know that God revealed who he is. God's never a smart aleck.
No.
But when you read I am who I am, that might be an answer someone like me would give to somebody. Well, I'm what I am. That's who I am.
It is what it is. Today, that's what everybody says.
It is what it is, yeah. That's not how God is answering. I am who I am broadens the name of God to the eternal aspect of it, ever present. He's present in the creation. He's present in the future. He's always with us. And so I am is translated from Yahweh, Y-H-W-H. And that's why we are looking at the name of Yahweh, I am.
And for Moses, this means he's being sent by the highest authority. King
Now,
of kings, Lord of lords.
God actually knew that this would be hard for Moses to understand. Now, you're going back to Egypt to bring the people of Israel out of slavery. Who would you be most afraid of? Probably Egypt, right?
Yeah.
Moses isn't. Moses is more afraid of the people of Israel. And the reason is, they're not going to believe me.
Because Moses grew up as an Egyptian.
And after he murdered that guy, he actually ran away, and so he's a fugitive from justice. And he's been gone for 40 years.
Now you're going in, Moses.
80 years old, he's going in
Yep.
to free the people. And so God says, I am is the name I will always have. You will always know me by I am. However, tell them I'm the God of their fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because they're going to relate to that much better. In 400 years, some of them didn't even know God. You know what? We talked about how in culture things change. People decide to run their own life and they don't trust in the Almighty Creator. So when you think about it from that standpoint, God is like, here's some extra ammunition for you so they will believe you. Nobody's really concerned about what Egypt believes, because the key is God is all-powerful. Egypt really isn't an issue. We need the people of Israel to believe in him. And so Moses is sent back as an emissary of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who all those people would have known, because that was who they were. We talk about Jews today. Well, there were no Jews then. It was one of the 12 tribes, and one of the tribes was Judah, and that became a name for the people we see in Jerusalem and the area, the hate crimes that have been done recently to Jewish people and Jewish worshipers. That is so modern compared to Israel. Israel was the big nation, and they went through so much over the years that they lost their identity as the big nation, and now it's just a tribe of Judah that continues. So when we look at this, and then what a beautiful story of the burning bush. I love that.
Yeah.
It's where God exhibits presence. There's a fire in a bush, and I am. Now, sometimes God steps out of the nature and actually does something supernatural, and then he will know it's from God, because no one else can do that. And so God has Moses' attention. I think it's important that at the end of your reading, this is the name I will be known through all generations, through all ages.
Right.
Well, we're talking about that name now. Jesus talked about that name, and in one instance, he talked about it in such a way, I am, Yahweh, that he actually got in a little bit of a pickle. In John chapter 8, Jesus uses the name of God to identify himself. Why don't you read that for us?
We're looking at John chapter 8, verses 56 through 58. Your father Abraham rejoiced that he would see my day. He saw it and was glad. So the Jews said to him, You're not yet 50 years old, and have you seen Abraham? Jesus said to them, Truly I say to you, before Abraham was, I am. So they picked up stones to throw at him, but Jesus hid himself and went out of the town. So here's the word. How can you possibly know this? You're only not even 50 years old. And Abraham, come on. It's too much for them. But that's when Jesus says, oh yes, let me tell you, I am. And then they want to stone him because he's claiming to be God.
Exactly.
And that's blasphemy. And they can't handle it.
You know, there's other passages.
And they shouldn't be able to handle it until you really know that he is.
In just a couple chapters, he says, I am the gate. I am the gate for the sheep.
For the sheep.
I am the good shepherd. I am the bread of
He
life.
says it over and over and over again, saying, I am God, and this is who I'm going to be taking care of, you.
So it's a
people of
very
Israel.
descriptive name that Jesus is God with us. He's present. And in today, God is ever present in our world as well. One of the things that Jim brought up in our discussion is from Isaiah 46. And it is descriptive of Yahweh telling us. And then Revelation 1:8, which I'll do that one if you want to look up Isaiah 46.
I'm at Isaiah 46. I'm going to be doing verses 9 and 10 for us here. Remember this and stand firm. Recall it to mind, your transgressors. Remember the former things of old, for I am God, and there is no other. I am God, and there is none like me, declared the end from the beginning, and from ancient times things not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will accomplish all my purpose, calling a bird of prey from the east, the man of my counsel from a faraway country.
So he has all-encompassing ability. He is the one who expands all through history. Now, when I look at that, I think of in Revelation, where the description that Jesus uses when he's already gone back to the Father, he is God. And he says in Revelation 1:8, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first letter of the alphabet and the last letter of the alphabet, that Greek alphabet. Says the Lord God, who is, who was, and who is to come, the Almighty. So the eternal aspect of God is wrapped up in I am. And I need that eternal God. I need the God who made the promises back in the Old Testament and the New Testament to be my God. And so I identify with this name very much.
So what's so important with this name? The name is important because those who know your name, it says in Psalm, will trust in you. The more we know about God and his name and what that means, the more we can trust in him. For you, Lord, L-O-R-D caps, have never forsaken those who seek you. He never has. Why would he start now?
Right.
That's good news, Dave.
That is good news, and we extend that to you. If you need to start a study in your home before you really get into it, we have a 7-booklet lesson that we can send free of charge. We have a Bible free of charge, the English Standard Version. And you can write to me at the Church of Christ in Escanaba, P.O. Box 751, 49829, or go on our webpage. You can request any of these things on our webpage as well.
Dave, it's been a joy working with you again and sharing these names of God with our viewing audience, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Until then, take
God
care.
bless.
God bless.
The Father's glory blaze, Spirit blaze, set our hearts on fire. Flow, river flow, flood the nations with grace and mercy. Send